This deck is far from dead. What is up, guys? This is tcgsam here, and in today's video I'm coming at you guys with an updated Mathmech deck profile for the new June 5th ban list. Now, even though Circular got hit on this list, this deck is definitely very much still alive and has a lot of ways to play still. It's still quite consistent and can play a large number of non-engine, making it a very solid choice for the next format. So without any further ado, let's just hop straight into it. I'm going to start things off, of course, with the one copy of Circular. Still the best card in the deck. You always want to search this through your regular combos, which is why we're playing 3 Signet Mining, 3 Small World as well, just to get to it. So just more consistent ways to see Circular. Even if you don't see any of these cards, a lot of your 2-card combinations or 1-card other starters do get you to Circular eventually through Version. So you're always going to go through Circular during your combo anyways. So we just want to max out on the search cards so we're able to see Circular in our hand, making it so our combos are a little bit more resilient to hand traps. Next up, I decided to play the Firewall Defensor and the Guardian engine. So for those of you who don't know what this does, essentially, when Firewall Defensor is sent to the grave as link material for a Cyberus monster, you just summon Guardian from deck, and then this allows you to make a Version line or just put a bunch of bodies on the board off of just your one normal summon. So when you're going first, you can search Circular off of just this and do your full combo, or going second, you just put a bunch of monsters on the board and try to kill your opponent with like Access Code and such. You don't need the other Firewall monsters, Firewall Phantom. You could side deck it with a copy of the Signet Counter Trap with the Code Talkers. You could do that, but I think in the main deck this is definitely enough because you are just using it to summon out a copy of Version most of the time. And then for the Mathfact Extenders, I'm playing 2 Sigma, 2 Addition, 2 Subtraction. So the thing is, now you want a little bit more of these because you do want a way to be able to summon Version all the time, or if you quote-unquote brick or get hand trap, just any 2 Cyberus monsters on the board is Heat Soul with like 2 draws, and that can be really good for your resource grind games. So I think you want to max out on, well, quote-unquote max out, because you don't want to play any more of these, otherwise you start seeing multiples and that's really bad. But I think these extenders are great at this ratio in this deck at the moment. And then I decided to play 3 Diameter. Like, you definitely don't have to. A lot of people are cutting it down to 2, and I definitely see why. You do have a lot of normal summons with the Firewall Defensor, but I like Diameter because, one, I want to hard draw it because, like, at least in my build at the moment, I don't play Cyberus Wicked, so being able to have like this in hand for follow-up is really good. But also just starting off your plays with like Diameter plus like Extender is also really good because it helps insulate you from hand traps. But once again, if you don't want to play this, you can just cut this down to 2 and then play an extra hand trap or something in here instead. And then I decided to play 1 copy of Mathmech Now, but the reason being is you need this for one of your combo lines so that it's like a true 1-card combo, and then you'll be able to set up a Diameter negation for your super factorial. So you definitely do need this because this just cycles out and another level 4 from your deck while putting another Mathmech in the grave. So it's a bit important for that. Of course, it's not like the greatest thing in the world to draw. Drawing it with like an extender is not bad though, because you just go Nabla, summon Diameter from deck, and then make Version that's protected from the hand traps because you have Diameter as material. So it's not the worst card in the world, and it does have an effect where if you link it off, you can just make that link monster attack 2 monsters, which is like a budget update jammer, so it's not the worst thing in the world either. And then for the Mathmech Solar Traps, just 1-on-1 still, very standard, not much to say about that, that hasn't changed. And then we're playing 3 copies of Parallel Exceed. Parallel Exceed is a great extender, so you definitely want to max out on this. It's just a really strong card. And then for the hand traps, because this deck still has room for quite a few, we're playing 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird. This card I think is still going to be great, despite Super Heavy Samurai falling a bit away from the meta. I think it's still pretty good into most of the other decks in the meta out there, so I think it's still worth playing. But do keep in mind that with these hand traps, you can feel free to switch them around as the format develops. You don't necessarily have to play these. I just thought at the beginning of the format when this was filmed that this would be pretty good. So next up after that, we're playing 3 copies of Nibiru. Similar idea. It's very possible that like if Cash still is like the most popular deck, people are still trying to play it, they may not play into this card, and it may only be worth side decking, for example. But once again, you could just decide on what cards you want to switch out afterwards. And then we'll play 3 copies of Ash Blossom Joyspring. I think this is really good, just no matter what the format is now. It's good against branded, and it's just generically good against everything else out there. And then from here, we're going to play 3 copies of Infinite Permanence as well. I think you want this one specifically because it's one of your outs to a Rise Heart, and you're gonna notice that I didn't put too many in my main deck, aside from the Impermanence and a Kaiju. So you have 3 plus the 3 small rolls plus the Kaiju, so that's 7 outs to a Rise Heart. I didn't know how popular it'd be, so I didn't play cards like Book of Moon in my main deck, but you do have the option to play Book of Moon if you want, depending on how popular CardTrader is once again. I played 1 Thunder King Lightning Strike Kaiju. I could be wrong, but the Kaiju with the most small world lines that can get to it is either this or Doggeran, the fire one. So depending on whichever one it is, you can just play that one instead. This is just searchable off a small world, and it's good because you want it out to a Rise Heart, and a Rise Heart can be really problematic for this deck. So just being able to have small world as an out to that is really important, and it should just be good against a lot of other decks out there. Just having it in your deck makes it so your opponents kind of have to respect it, and it kind of forces them to negate it if they have an interruption, to negate the small world. And then the last card, just a Flux Spot. I played Call by the Grave. You can definitely, like I said, cut down on diameter and then play a second hand trap by cutting this as well. So you can bump the hand trap count up to 14 if you really wanted to. I think Call by the Grave is pretty good. It's against pretty much everything but CardTrader. But like I said, this is just a Flux Spot. You can play whatever you want in this slot. We are just playing 40 cards. I think that's pretty standard. You definitely want to play 40 because with 2 less circular now, you're not going to be seeing it nearly as often. So you always want to have the most consistency as possible by playing 40. In the extra deck, we're playing 2 copies of Valenburtion and 1 copy of Laplacian. This is still pretty standard, nothing has really changed. Even though Diablosis isn't a thing anymore, I still think 2 is pretty good. Although you can make an argument for 1 because in theory, once you go first and set up your board with circular in rotation, you don't really actually need the second one, because if you're able to make a rank 4 again, then you're able to make a link 2, and a link 2 means you can just go for access codes. So you don't necessarily have to play the second one. I haven't tested it, but I think it still warrants playing because you never want to be in a situation where your first one gets stopped and you just don't have a second one. Or let's say you activate Super Factorial and your opponent like DD Crows or Bistio is one of the monsters. You still want to go into this to search follow-ups. So I think 2 is still pretty standard and correct. But if you're really wanting to play something else, I suppose you could cut it down to 1 and see how that works. For the Link 1s, we're playing 1 Almirage, 1 Lingaribo. Lingaribo is great against trap decks, of course, but you also just need a Link 1 for Firewall Defensor. Almirage, this one is interesting. I only play like the 2 hand traps that can be normal summons, so Ash Blossom and Droll, but depending on how many of those you play, you may or may not want to cut the Almirage down. You can cut this as well if you don't play, for example, 4 copies of like the hand traps that can be normal summoned, because this is pretty much just never going to come up then, because no matter what Cyberse you have, you can just turn it into Lingaribo and then do Parallel Exceed from there. So I only play this because I play a decent number of hand traps that can be normal summoned. So yeah, it just depends on how many of those you play. And then this is interesting. I play 1 Splash Mage, and I'll explain a little bit more when I get to the end of the extra deck, but you can play up to 2 of this. This is just a really great card. Update Jammer, of course, for your OTKs. Transco Talker for your Recursion. This is good going first now. Use it in some of your going first combos, which I'll be posting later on. So do stay tuned for that. I'll be showing you what the deck can do going first, despite having circular at 1. 1 copy of Heat Soul. This is like the deck's plan B now. It's still a really great card that you want to play for sure. And then double access code. I still think that even without CardTrader, a double access code is good. The access code is just so easy to make in Cyberse. Essentially any 2 monsters can become it, and access code is just super powerful in a lot of different game states. Playing the second one also helps you play around a card like Nibiru. Just depending on how popular that card is, this extra deck is like subject to change as well. You definitely don't have to play the second one as well, and you're gonna notice I'm saying that a lot, but there's just so many options you can like go with now. You don't necessarily have to play second access code if you don't want to. And then like the last 4 slots are sort of what I wanted to talk about. These are like the quote-unquote like flex spots that depend on like personal preference. First, explaining these 2, this is to help play around Nibiru. So you're gonna notice that's why I play 2 access code as well, because I respect like Nibiru as a card. I think people are still gonna be on it. So if you get Nibiru on your first access code, you can just turn the token into Link Spider, use Equation or whatever extender to summon out this. Use this to bring back Update Jammer, and then, use this to bring back this, link these 2 into Transco, bring back Update Jammer, and then you have a second access code that can kill them. So I think this is good for that reason. I also do like the G Golem Crystal Heart because I am playing Terahertz. And because I'm playing Terahertz, it means I go through Transcode Talker on my very first turn, and this just becomes my other Splash Mage afterwards. Speaking of Terahertz, I play Terahertz and Disabverm. The Firewall Defensor just gets to this alone plus Super Factorial, which is really strong. You have Disabverm as a smaller Trap Negate, which is something I think the deck really needed. Just a hard Omni Negate, which is really good. You don't have to play this. You may also notice I'm not playing like Mirror Logic Aggregator, the XYZ monster, and that's because I don't want to commit too many monsters to my extra deck. To this specifically, because like this, you can't use Disabverm or Mirror Logic Aggregator aside from Terahertz, so it's just not really that great if you're never summon Terahertz or if your Terahertz somehow gets outed. And it really depends on what sort of board breakers people are playing. If they're playing like Mind Control, Change Your Heart, Kaijus, then you maybe just want to cut this entirely. And then another option you can go for is the second Splash Mage as well as the Cyber's Wicked, and just make Heat Soul pass like your plan A and bump up the number of hand traps in your deck. So it really just depends on what the format shapes up to be. But at the start of it, I think this is pretty solid. You don't necessarily need the second target because even if your opponent doesn't out this on their turn, you can use this to send like a Sigma for follow-up, or you can use it to send a copy of Diameter if you haven't gotten access to it already. So that's why my extra deck may look kind of weird to some of you. This is what I was playing, but like I mentioned, you have so many different options. You could cut down on one access code if you don't have it. You can play a second Splash Mage. You can cut Almirage, and yeah, there's so many different things you can do with the extra deck, and I think there's no really right one. It really just depends on what the format shapes up to be and how popular different like board breakers and hand traps are. So that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Do stay tuned once again for the Mathmech combo video, which is going to be coming out after this. Stay tuned for that. But with that being said, I just want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.